Hi guys, my name is Sukaja. Welcome back to my booktube channel. Today I'm here to talk to you about the 7 books that I read in May. May was the most fantastic reading month I have ever had. Last year didn't turn out to be that great in terms of my reading, but this time over, when we heard about the impending lockdown, I decided that I'm not going to let that happen again. I just picked up really interesting books and I've been on a roll. And I don't know if this is going to continue for the rest of the year, but then I hope it does, and I hope you'll get to see me talk about some favorites and also books that you'll find to be your favorites really soon. I want to talk to you about 7 books, so it's going to be a bit of a lengthy video, but I assure you that all these books gave me fantastic moments. They were very intellectually stimulating and very interesting. I've read a wide range of books this month, from memoirs and non-fiction to reading about mental health and also reading and Gothic fiction as well. I've got 2 Gothic fiction recommendations coming up, so stay tuned and watch it till the end. Without further ado, let's get started. The first book I want to talk to you about is Brown Baby, a memoir of race, family and home, written by Nikesh Shukla, the editor of the collection of essays titled The Good Immigrant. Brown Baby is basically a letter that he writes to his daughter, which he hopes that she will read once she grows up. It's not written in an epistolary format or anything, but there are different chapters with questions for titles. So along the line of how to talk to you about your heritage, how to tell you about my mother, and things like that. So this is also in a way a love letter that he's written for his mother. In a sense, he expresses his undying love that he has for his mother and the grief of her death, what a toll that took on him. So Nikesh Shukla is somebody who's born in Britain. He's a British Indian writer, and he writes this book for his daughter, who happens to be of mixed race, because he married somebody who isn't Indian and is British. So it turns out that her color is brown because she is mixed race, and he wants to talk to her about how to navigate questions of color, how to navigate tricky areas in life. When she grows up, she's going to have to face the real world, and of course it is not the prettiest picture, because at the time when he was writing the book, it was President Trump who was in power, and a lot of things in England weren't doing that well. He talks about a lot of things, from his Gujarati roots, his love for food, the unhealthy relationship he has with food. That's another thing that's mentioned. He covers a wide range of topics, and it's also a little humorous here and there, and I really love the use of humor to sort of really engage the reader. And I found myself really seeing things from this person's point of view. Now, if you've been on this channel and following me for a while, you know that I enjoy reading books about immigration, books about race, books that deal with questions of identity and a sense of home as well. So here he explores what is a home and what it means for a home to be a home. And he talks about his relationship with parenting in general. I felt like more than anything else, he really talked to his daughter from a place of love, and he wanted to, in a way, protect her, and was fully aware when he brought her into this world that it isn't going to be a pretty picture that she's going to have to face, but he wants to equip her with the skills that he can. And like any other parent, I think he is coming from that perspective, and I thought that it was really interesting. He covers so many issues and sort of dumbs it down as well. It's not full of jargon or anything. It's very readable and digestible, and it also tugs at the emotional heartstrings. There are descriptions of him sneaking into the kitchen for a midnight snack because parenting took a real toll on him. It was something that caused him a lot of anxiety, so as to cope with that, he would go in the middle of the night around to the kitchen, get food for himself, or when he's picking up his daughter from nursery, he would stop at the fast food joints, pick up food, and then go home and secretly eat it when no one's looking. He talks about very personal and deep issues that he brings to light, and he's coming from a very vulnerable place throughout the book. Like, he is able to admit that he is far from the perfect parent, and it is a very daunting task to be a parent. But he also talks about how enriching it is when his daughter asks him these really big questions about things, and he feels obligated to be able to answer her in the best, most authentic and honest way possible, because he wants to paint the clearest, most real picture of the world. He doesn't want to tell her lies about death. He doesn't want to tell her lies about gender. He wants to really bring her into the conversation and wants to include her. And I found all of this really endearing, and I absolutely love the memoir. It's written really well, and I would highly recommend you to read it if you're interested in any of the things that I mentioned about the book here. I will link it in the description box. As always, the books that I mentioned will be linked there, and I will be putting affiliate links in there. So if you pick a book and decide to buy it from the links in the description box, I will be getting a teeny bit of money, and that always helps. So do check it out. Now, the second book I want to talk to you about is Jhumpa Lahari's Whereabouts, and this is a recent release, and I absolutely love this book. Now, I'm someone who recently read her last book, which was translated from the Italian, and that was called In Other Words, and I absolutely loved it. I remember reading it on a plane and just being so engrossed by the power of her writing. I loved her writing style. It's got this elegance to it, and I think elegance is the best word that sort of describes her way of writing. In Whereabouts, it's sort of a continuation of that, but the things that she explores in other words are sort of amplified in Whereabouts, if you ask me. It's a collection of brief snapshots of a person who's, finding themselves sort of alone and inhabiting a city. So if you're someone who has visited Italy or any parts of Italy, then I feel like you'll be able to really enjoy the book and you'll feel like you're there again, and it's just absolutely beautiful the way she describes things. So she talks about the baker she passes by on a daily basis, or like the persons she meets on her walk. And then what I noticed is that there's this level of intimacy that she explores that exists between strangers. So for instance, there's this first story that I really liked about how she's just very contemplative. That's what the writing is like. And the first story, she's sort of walking down the streets, and then one day she meets this man who is some friend's husband, and they don't really know each other too well, but she meets him, and for a brief moment she feels that maybe in another life she might have been his wife, and she just lets her mind wander in that sense. Feels a bit like stream of consciousness, but it isn't. It's really interesting. And then they see the shadows of the pedestrians passing by. So it's this imagery that she paints that makes this book so beautiful that it should be regarded as a work of art. She makes writing seem very effortless and sort of easy. I was watching an interview of her talking about Whereabouts. I'll link that in the description box if you're interested. So in it she talks about how she was sort of leaving Italy at the time that she wrote this set of stories and snippets. She had to come to terms with the fact that she won't be living in this country that she has known for such a long time and sort of adopted as her own. The people, the sounds, the sights, the smells, all of it is described, and you really feel like you're there when you read it. It is really powerful writing, and I still haven't figured it out, like what about that book I liked so much. The words, they sort of wash over you like waves, and very calming and soothing, That's how I would like to describe Whereabouts, and it was just mesmerizing, and I highly recommend reading this as well. I don't know if any of the books mentioned in this video will be my favorites, but stick around till the end of the year or till next month when I reveal my top 6 books of the first 6 months of 2021. Anyway, so that was Whereabouts. I feel like I can talk a lot about this book because there were so many aspects of it I liked, from her love of stationery being made very clear in one of the stories, to her sense of loneliness and that isolation, the way she talks about being by herself. It's also very liberating, and independence is sort of in the forefront. Like, you see her as a very independent person who is full of self-control, and her destiny is in her own hands. She can decide every morning when she wakes up where she wants to go, what she wants to do, and that is sort of intoxicating, the way in which she describes this level of independence that she experiences, and giving up that independence, not being able to do what she wants to do every day in a foreign country that she absolutely adores, but she has made her own. It's really nice. So I highly recommend it, and if you want to talk further about this, I'd be happy to, so just DM me. I'd be glad to talk to you about it. The third book I read is Earthlings by Sayaka Murata. Last year I read The Convenience Store Woman, which is her first novel that was translated from Japanese to English. The Convenience Store Woman is about a very similar subject to this particular book, Earthlings. Both of them deal with women who are in their 30s. They are basically critiques of society and patriarchy in general. I personally liked Earthlings better, even though Earthlings was far more disturbing and makes you uncomfortable sort of a book than Convenience Store Woman. Convenience Store Woman can be enjoyed and read by pretty much everybody, but Earthlings is like this complex mass of stuff that needs to be unraveled layer by layer. So there's so much going on, and this is great for discussions as well. For me, Earthlings was gripping. It was something that I couldn't put down, something I wanted to read, and at the same time made me go, what is this really happening, at every other chapter. But then I read it and I had so much to think about. So if you want a very thought-provoking book, then I recommend picking up Earthlings. So this is about a girl called Natsuki. Every year she has gone to this ancestral house where she spends time with her cousins and is there to celebrate a festival. One day on one of the festivals, she meets her cousin and they sort of make this little ritual where they get married to each other. That's just one small thing that happens in the expanse of the story. Natsuki is very different from everybody else because she tells herself a narrative in order to help keep her away from labels that society has of giving to people. Like they say you're a wife, you're a mother, or a sister. So these are roles which have a lot of attributes which need to be met if you are any of these things. Natsuki, what she does is she creates an alternate narrative wherein she believes that she is an alien from a different planet. So she looks at Earthlings from an earlier age on as different, and she feels apart from them. In everything that she does, she tends to see herself as an outsider. And in a way, this sort of helps her counter and really question everything that is being thrown at her by society. She doesn't take everything without questioning it because she sees things from a very different point of view, like she's a foreigner. I think it's really brilliant and something that everybody should do but doesn't do enough of. We blindly follow tenets, we blindly follow a lot of things without questioning stuff. But Natsuki decides to use the alternate narrative that she creates and the different story that she tells herself to combat the hegemonic discourse that's going around her in the world. So that I think is pretty cool, and it's a critique of patriarchy as well. Is that a way to look at all of us men and women as same? And this book kind of goes there, even though it employs methods that are questionable to get to that somewhat create a utopian setting which doesn't last for long. So I don't want to give away much. I'm just gonna go and say that towards the end of this book there was a little bit of cannibalism involved, and it's not for the faint-hearted, but nevertheless it is a very timely read and necessary. I think it's very brave, the narrative itself. So give it a read because you will have a lot of thoughts. Natsuki has feelings for you, her cousin. Circumstances have it that they do not meet for a really long time. The way society perceives a lot of things, if children do it, it's okay, but the moment you're an adult and then you do it, it's not okay. Or sometimes it's the other way around. If adults are doing something, it's alright, but the moment children do that, it's a problem. So the book makes you question the way you see the world, the way you see life, the way you see structures in society, and how you fit yourself in that structure. It makes you question yourself and your own decisions and actions. In both The Convenience Store Woman and Earthlings, we see that the protagonists, they see themselves as a functioning cog in the machinery of society, that they're only there to contribute. Earthlings, she believes that she is a worker of the factory, and that her responsibility is to get an education, get a job, reproduce, and so on. So that's what this book is about. She tries to combat this narrative by creating an alternate one in her own mind, and this can be seen as madness by people, but at the same time, is this the only way we can combat the larger narrative? It brings to mind so many possibilities. Enough said. Moving on to the next book that I read. I also read The Midnight Library by Matt Haig, but I've already made a video about it where I reviewed the book, and I'm going to link that over here so that you can go watch it and catch up on that. That was also a really good book to read, and it was something that is very apt for Mental Health Awareness Month and deals with themes of suicide, and magic realism is there as well. This girl is given a chance to switch her life and trade it in for something better. The next book that I read in May was Notes on Grief by Chimamanda Ngozi Adichie. This is a book that has been recently released. A small set of recollections basically that she has and thoughts that she has once she loses her dear father, whom she happened to have lost in the peak of the pandemic last year, not to the coronavirus, but the fact that he was unwell and he was also old. She lost him abruptly and had to hear about the news from a distance, many thousands of miles away. She and her siblings got onto a Zoom call where they ended up having to hear the terrible news, and they couldn't even come down and visit him in their hometown. They had to stay where they are and absorb the news, and that is something that had an impact on her, and she talks about that. She also recollects her times with her father fondly and reminiscence, all those things, and there's some jokes and some funny things he used to do put in as well to add some flavor. Personally, this isn't my favorite, and I wouldn't have normally picked this up, but I'm grateful to the publishers, HarperCollins, for having sent me this book. It's about grief, and that's not a subject that I am too interested in right now. The only thing I would have liked is for this book to be a little thicker, because her writing, as always, has lines which are pretty, striking. Let me read this. Grief is a cruel kind of education. You learn how ungentle mourning can be, how full of anger. You learn how glib condolences can feel. You learn how much grief is about language, the failure of language, and the grasping for language. I would have really liked if she explored how language can be used to sort of cope with grief, and how there is no real language for grief, apart from the fact that it is just plain emotion. I would have liked for her to really dwell on that, and a longer piece about that, longer essay would have been nice. But if you want to read the rest of her work and can't get enough of Chimamanda, then do pick this up. Next two books that I read were Gothic novels, and I suddenly felt myself to be in a mood where I wanted to consume Gothic literature. I picked up We Have Always Lived in the Castle, which is a classic written by American writer Shirley Jackson. I have previously read The Haunting of Hill House by Shirley Jackson, and I liked it, but I like this more. This is about a girl who is living with her sister. So it turns out that the sisters live in a house. One of them is accused to have killed her own family many years ago. They live with their uncle, and their uncle is sort of not in the right place mentally, so because he's always rambling. But then again, it depends on how you view madness, so it puts that into question as well. They live with their uncle. There's this obsession with food because one of the sisters, the one who is accused of murder, ends up preparing lots and lots of food on a daily basis, and she feeds her sister, feeds her uncle, and it's sort of like this caretaker, very motherly sort of figure. This book definitely has potential to put your hairs on end. That's the kind of book this is, and I really enjoyed it. It was very creepy, very eerie, and towards the end, the kind of conclusion that she gave to the book was just phenomenal. This is the kind of novel that you need to sort of piece together as you go along, because it's not going to give you everything in one straight linear narrative. Not that it isn't linear, but the fact that the narrator is unreliable. So you only get her side of the story, and there's no other side that you get. She was too little when the whole incident happened. There are a lot of things that she says in dialogue and everything that you want to underline and sort of, keep guessing. So Shirley Jackson definitely keeps you guessing in this one. You really want to find out how their existence ended up this way. So it's a really intriguing novel. Absolutely enjoyed it, and I highly recommend it. And it's also great for rereading and for book clubs, and it's perfectly Gothic in every sense. If you love haunted house stories, this book kind of also explores how haunted houses become haunted houses. A lot of the time it's the stories that the villagers say, it's the stories that people tell each other. That's what makes it a haunted house in the first place. It's not like there are ghosts and they have been seen or it has been proven. It talks about myths, how they come to be, and things like that, and I feel like that's really interesting and something to explore in this. The next book I read is Florence and Giles by John Harding. I did a vlog about this book. Didn't really read too much of it, but if you want to snip it into my life, I've got the vlog here, which I'll link here. If you're interested in catching up, it's a cozy weekend reading vlog. I'm going to give a full review of this because I haven't posted about it on my Instagram, which also I will link in the description box down below. So Florence and Giles is also a lovely story and very perfect for Gothic fiction lovers, and highly recommend this. This and this one are both on my list of must-read Gothic books. This book is set in 1891 in New England in the United States. This is purposefully set in 1891 because that was a time when seances were very popular. People were thinking about death and what it's all about in a lot of different ways. There was a civil war that they were just recovering from, and he sets this novel during that time. So it's about a couple of siblings, Florence and a little brother, Giles. And it's a psychological Gothic narrative because it's told again from Florence's perspective, and she's just 9 years old. But then she has a tendency to make her own language because she was never educated, and she's someone who has never been taught formally how to read and write. But she taught herself because in the house that she inhabits, there is one library filled with tons of books from top to bottom, and she's been secretly going there and reading books without people knowing that she's able to do that. So she's been reading books and she's learned the language. She's inspired by Shakespeare, who likes to form words on the fly, and so she decides to, whenever she can't find a word for something, she will just make a word and use that in the narrative. And initially, for the grammar Nazi in me, that wasn't fun because I kept being like, oh my god, that sounds kind of weird, and that's not really a word. But then when I stopped doing that, I really appreciated the language. And I watched this interview of John Harding where he says that it was really easy for him to continue writing in that manner, and then it was hard for him to stop writing that way because it came so naturally to him. So anyway, so Florence is this 9-year-old girl who just wants to protect her little brother because she doesn't have anyone else. They live in this big house with a bunch of servants and their uncle, who is supposedly their caretaker. But we know nothing about their parents and nothing about their uncle, and he never makes an appearance in the book either. This is also inspired by Henry James's The Turn of the Screw, which is a very famous Gothic novel again, and I highly recommend reading that. And that is about two children who are introduced to a new nanny who comes to take care of them. They are a little bit wary of her, and the whole book is written from her perspective. And this one, on the other hand, is actually written from Florence's perspective. So for once we get the perspective of the children as opposed to the perspective of the governess. So in this also there is a governess that comes in. I'm not going to say anything more, but it's full of twists and turns, and the plot is very fast paced, and you will definitely be absorbed. And I highly recommend reading this on a night when it's rainy outside and you have a cup of tea in front of you and there's a candle. Very atmospheric. Absolutely loved it. Highly recommend this as well. There were moments when I felt like the editing could have been better. Certain references made to dancing girls in the attic which never got any page space at all. So I was like, why did that happen? But just once I think I noticed that. Initially it just made me feel really bad for Florence. Your feelings are constantly in a state of flux for the character in this novel. So that's another interesting thing about this. So these are all the 7 books that I read this month, and I hope you liked this video. And if you did, please give it a thumbs up. I will be back next week with another bookish video. Also, comment which of the books you would like to read in the comments down below. I'd love to hear. Stay safe, stay sane, and I will see you very soon. Bye!